Remember when a diner menu offered things you almost never see anymore? In the 1950s, a diner could be breakfast stop, lunch counter, family restaurant, and late-night refuge all in one. Behind the chrome and formica, menus mixed hot sandwiches, blue plate dinners, chilled desserts, and fountain drinks made by hand. Some of those orders survived for decades, while others faded as soda fountains closed and casual restaurant menus became more standardized. Not every item was found everywhere, and a few were strongly regional, but together they capture a recognizable slice of mid-century dining. So slide onto a counter stool, reach for the paper menu, and see how many of these old diner orders you remember. 1. The diner diet plate. Few 1950s plates look more unmistakably dated than the so-called diet plate, a meal built around restraint rather than indulgence. A typical version paired a plain hamburger patty with a scoop of cottage cheese and canned peach halves on crisp iceberg lettuce. Restaurant records from the decade show combinations like this appearing as Americans became increasingly interested in watching their weight. The presentation was almost geometric: brown patty, white cottage cheese, bright fruit, and pale green lettuce sharing one uncluttered plate. There was no giant salad bowl, protein shake, or modern nutrition language attached to it. The menu simply promised something lighter. For many customers, that cottage cheese scoop became as recognizable as the chrome napkin holder and sugar dispenser sitting beside it. Today, every ingredient still exists, but this exact diner arrangement has nearly disappeared, along with the language that once surrounded it. Looking back, it is funny how an ordinary lunch plate can become a complete picture of its time. One glance at that lonely peach half is enough to place the plate in another era. 2. Open-faced hot roast beef sandwich. This was a sandwich only in the loosest sense, because once the gravy arrived, picking it up with your hands was impossible. Slices of white bread were covered with roast beef, often joined by mashed potatoes, then flooded with deep brown gravy. The result belonged to the world of blue plate specials, filling, familiar, and substantial enough to count as a full meal. The bread underneath did not stay crisp. It softened into the gravy and became part of the dish instead of merely holding it. A fork and knife were essential, which made the word sandwich feel almost humorous to anyone seeing the plate for the first time. Hot roast beef plates remained diner favorites for years, especially where cooks could slice yesterday's roast for another day's special. Modern restaurants still serve roast beef, but they usually place it on a roll, in a French dip, or inside a handheld sandwich. The old gravy-soaked version survives in pockets, yet it is no longer the automatic counter order it once seemed to be. For anyone who remembers it, the real flavor may be that first piece of bread, soaked completely through with gravy. 3. The Denver Sandwich. Before the Denver omelet became the familiar name, many Americans knew this combination as a sandwich tucked between slices of toast. Eggs were cooked with diced ham, onion, and green pepper, then slipped onto bread for a portable breakfast or quick lunch. Historical accounts describe the Denver sandwich as especially popular in the 1950s, when it appeared widely enough to earn national recognition. It was practical counter food, inexpensive ingredients, fast griddle cooking, and no need for a large dinner plate or complicated garnish. No one sitting at the counter needed an origin story. They just knew the sandwich was hot, filling, and quick to serve. Over time, the filling stayed while the bread disappeared, and the Denver omelet became far more familiar than the sandwich itself. That reversal makes this item especially useful for nostalgia, because younger diners may recognize every ingredient, but not the original format. A few restaurants still make one, yet finding a true Denver sandwich today can require far more searching than ordering a Denver omelet. It is a vanished form, hiding inside a breakfast combination America never actually forgot. 4. The old-fashioned ice cream soda. An ice cream soda was not simply a scoop dropped into bottled soft drink, even though the two are often confused today. At a real soda fountain, flavored syrup and carbonated water were mixed to order, then combined with milk or cream and ice cream. The soda jerk controlled the stream, the syrup, and the foam, turning a few simple ingredients into a tall, overflowing glass. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and other flavors could all become sodas, each with bubbles rising around the melting ice cream. The long spoon and paper straw were almost part of the recipe because the drink changed texture from the first sip to the last. This was refreshment and dessert at once, perfectly suited to the lunch counter after school or a booth shared on a date. As traditional fountains vanished, so did the everyday skill of building these drinks, one glass at a time, from syrup and soda water. Floats remain common enough, but the old-fashioned fountain soda is now more likely to appear at a preserved pharmacy or retro shop. The towering foam is what many people remember first, sometimes before they remember which flavor they ordered. 5. Chicken a la king. Chicken a la king sounded elegant, but by mid-century it had traveled far beyond formal dining rooms and into everyday restaurant lunches. Tender pieces of chicken were folded into a pale cream sauce with mushrooms and pimientos, sometimes with peas or other small additions. The sauce might be spooned over toast points, biscuits, rice, or a pastry shell, depending on the kitchen and the menu. Its appeal was partly visual. Creamy sauce, red pimiento, and neat pieces of toast made an ordinary chicken dish feel slightly dressed up. By the 1950s, it was familiar enough to appear in many kinds of American restaurants, rather than belonging to one exclusive setting. For a lunch counter customer, it offered something softer and more composed than a burger, without demanding the price of a steak dinner. Then, tastes changed. Cream sauce entrees lost fashion, and the name itself began sounding like a relic from an older menu. Try finding chicken a la king on an ordinary casual restaurant menu today, and you may have to explain what you mean. Its disappearance shows how quickly a dish can move from standard luncheon choice to something that needs explaining. 6. Chicken croquettes. Chicken croquettes were another old restaurant order that turned leftovers and finely chopped meat into something surprisingly formal on the plate. The chicken mixture was shaped, breaded, and fried, often into cones or short cylinders rather than the flat patties familiar today. Many versions arrived with chicken gravy, mashed potatoes, peas, or another simple vegetable beside them, creating a tidy, complete meal. Croquettes had strong connections to cafeterias, automats, and diners, especially in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, though recognition spread farther. The crisp outside and soft, creamy interior made them different from fried chicken, chicken patties, or the later frozen chicken nugget. They also fit the economics of older kitchens, where cooked chicken could be chopped, seasoned, reshaped, and served as a new entree. As restaurant labor changed and convenience foods became more standardized, hand-shaped croquettes gradually slipped away from ordinary menus. Some traditional restaurants still keep them alive, which only makes them feel more like survivors from a disappearing style of American dining. If you remember the little fried shapes under a ribbon of gravy, you remember a menu category that has nearly vanished. 7. Baked ham with pineapple. A thick slice of baked ham topped with a pineapple ring could turn an ordinary diner special into something unmistakably mid-century. The pineapple usually came from a can, and some versions added a bright maraschino cherry right in the center of the ring. Sweet fruit against salty ham was not considered strange. It was a familiar combination in homes, cafeterias, and restaurant dinner specials. On a diner plate, the ham might arrive with sweet potatoes, peas, or mashed potatoes, depending on the kitchen and the day. The appeal was partly presentation, because one yellow ring and one red cherry made a brown slice of ham suddenly look festive. This was the period when canned pineapple carried a little sense of modern convenience and tropical brightness into everyday American cooking. Ham itself never disappeared, but the pineapple ring presentation gradually became associated with retro recipes and holiday memories rather than weeknight dining. Today, a diner is far more likely to offer grilled ham at breakfast than a composed baked ham dinner decorated with fruit. That cheerful pineapple ring is one of those tiny visual details capable of dating a plate almost instantly. 8. The cherry phosphate. Long before every fountain drink came from a branded dispenser, soda counters could build beverages from syrup, carbonated water, and concentrated flavorings. A phosphate added a small amount of acid phosphate, giving the drink a dry, tart edge that balanced the sweetness of fruit syrup. Cherry was a classic choice, producing a vivid red drink that looked simple but tasted sharper than an ordinary cherry soda. The name once made sense to customers who understood fountain vocabulary such as phosphate, Ricky, malt, soda, and sundae without explanation. Ordering one also meant watching it being made, with the soda jerk measuring syrup and pulling sparkling water directly into the glass. By the 1950s, phosphates were survivors of an older fountain tradition, still familiar in places that continued making drinks by hand. Mass-produced bottled sodas and standardized fountain systems eventually made that specialized vocabulary and preparation far less common. Today, the word phosphate on a drink menu can sound more like chemistry than refreshment, unless the shop deliberately preserves soda fountain history. For older customers, however, a cherry phosphate can bring back the sound of fizz hitting syrup across a polished counter. 9. Open-faced hot hamburger sandwich. The hot hamburger sandwich took the familiar beef patty and turned it into a knife and fork dinner rather than a handheld burger. A hamburger patty sat on white bread, usually open-faced, while brown gravy covered the meat and soaked into everything underneath. Mashed potatoes often shared the plate, and the gravy might flow over both sides until sandwich and side became one continuous meal. It was humble food, but it answered a basic diner promise: hot, filling, inexpensive, and ready without much ceremony. The dish should not be confused with Salisbury steak, which had its own seasonings, shapes, sauces, and menu identity in many restaurants. Here, the point was recognizable hamburger, transformed by gravy, bread, and a plate large enough to require utensils. As burgers became taller, cheesier, and more elaborate, the old gravy-covered version moved in the opposite direction and quietly faded away. Some traditional diners still make it, especially in regions where hot sandwiches never completely left the menu, but it is no longer standard. Its memory is less about presentation than comfort: soft bread, brown gravy, mashed potatoes, and nothing pretending to be fancy. 10. Ham salad sandwich. Ham salad once occupied the same everyday lunch territory now dominated by tuna salad, chicken salad, and modern deli sandwiches. Chopped or ground ham was mixed with mayonnaise and often sweet pickle relish, celery, or other small additions chosen by the kitchen. Spread thickly on soft white bread, it was cool, salty, slightly sweet, and easy to prepare ahead for the lunch rush. Versions appeared in lunch counters, drugstore fountains, cafeterias, and small restaurants, with regional recipes changing the texture and seasoning. Some cooks used true leftover ham, while others stretched the idea with processed meats, making the name less precise from place to place. That flexibility was part of its usefulness, because the sandwich could be made cheaply without requiring the griddle during a busy noon hour. Ham salad has not vanished from America, but it has retreated toward grocery delis, family recipes, and a handful of regional strongholds. On modern restaurant menus, it is far less visible than the chicken and tuna versions that once sat beside it. For people who remember the taste, sweet pickle relish and finely chopped ham can bring back a whole lunch counter in one bite. 11. Tapioca pudding. Tapioca pudding was the kind of dessert that waited quietly in a chilled case, rather than arriving with flames, chocolate towers, or fancy plating. Its small translucent pearls gave it a texture people either loved or disliked, which made the memory unusually strong in both directions. Served cold in a thick glass dessert cup, it often sat beside rice pudding, gelatin, custard, and slices of pie. The ingredients were modest, the portion was small, and the dessert required no last-minute work from a busy diner kitchen. For children, the pearls could seem mysterious, earning comparisons to tiny beads or fish eyes long before anyone cared about culinary elegance. For adults, it was familiar comfort food, soft and mildly sweet after a heavier plate covered in gravy. Packaged tapioca and instant puddings kept the flavor alive at home, but restaurant dessert cases gradually shifted toward other choices. Today, tapioca survives in entirely different forms, yet the old creamy diner pudding in a footed glass is much harder to encounter. Love it or hate it, that little glass cup remains one of the most recognizable textures of an older dessert counter. 12. The malted milk. A milkshake and a malt could look almost identical, but one spoonful of malted milk powder gave the older fountain drink its unmistakable flavor. Malted milk had begun as a nutritional product decades earlier, yet soda fountains turned it into something cold, thick, sweet, and indulgent. Chocolate malts became especially associated with counters and booths, where the drink arrived in a tall glass with a long-handled spoon. Sometimes the metal mixing cup came along too, holding the extra portion that did not fit into the serving glass. The malt flavor was slightly toasted and grainy, giving the drink more depth than a standard chocolate shake made with syrup alone. By the 1950s, ordering a malt required no explanation because the term belonged naturally to the vocabulary of American soda fountains. Milkshakes survived the transition to fast food far better, while true malts became increasingly associated with old-fashioned diners and specialty shops. You can still find them, but many younger customers have never been asked the once common question, shake or malt? For those who remember, that spoonful of powder separated an ordinary shake from the drink they actually came to the counter for. 13. Liverwurst on rye. Not every nostalgic diner order inspires hunger today, and liverwurst on rye is a good example of a memory that can divide a table. A typical sandwich used soft liver sausage with rye bread, yellow mustard, and sometimes raw onion for a sharp, unmistakable bite. It belonged especially to lunch counter and delicatessen traditions in the Northeast and Midwest, rather than being equally common in every region. The texture was smooth and rich, very different from sliced ham or roast beef, and there was no hiding its strong liver flavor. For some customers, it was inexpensive, satisfying working-day food. For others, even the smell was enough to choose something else. That mixed reaction is part of the nostalgia, because old menus contained plenty of items people remember without necessarily wanting them back. Changing tastes and declining organ meat consumption pushed liverwurst sandwiches away from mainstream casual restaurants, even where the sausage remained available. Today they are more likely to survive in traditional delis, specialty markets, or family kitchens than on an ordinary diner board. If this sandwich was in your household, mustard, rye, onion, and liverwurst probably need no explanation at all. 14. The New York egg cream. The egg cream is the most regional order on this list, but in mid-century New York, its connection to soda fountains was extraordinary. Despite the name, the classic drink contained neither egg nor cream, just milk, chocolate syrup, and a forceful stream of seltzer. The technique mattered because the seltzer had to build a foamy head while the chocolate remained rich beneath it. In Brooklyn and other parts of New York City, neighborhood candy stores and luncheonettes could sell these drinks by the thousands. Food historians place the egg cream's strongest popularity from the 1930s through the 1950s, before traditional soda fountains began declining. Outside New York, the drink never carried the same universal recognition, so it should be remembered as a regional icon rather than national standard. That local identity is exactly what makes it valuable. Some viewers will remember it instantly, while others may have barely heard the name. A few classic shops still make egg creams properly, but the drink now survives more as heritage than everyday American fountain culture. For a New Yorker who grew up with one, 3 simple ingredients can taste like an entire neighborhood that no longer looks the same. 15. The half-fried chicken dinner. Fried chicken certainly did not disappear, but the old diner order of half a chicken on one plate is far less ordinary today. Restaurant menu histories describe fried chicken as one of the defining American choices of the 1950s, when poultry became increasingly affordable and abundant. Instead of wings, tenders, or a sandwich, the customer could receive a breast, leg, thigh, and wing as one substantial dinner. The plate might include mashed potatoes, gravy, peas, coleslaw, a roll, or whatever sides the kitchen paired with that day's special. It was the kind of order that made the table feel full before anyone had taken a bite, especially when the chicken arrived crisp and hot. As chains standardized fried chicken into pieces, buckets, sandwiches, and combo meals, the half-chicken diner plate became much less visible. Traditional restaurants still preserve versions of it, so this is not an extinct food, but a fading way of ordering something familiar. That distinction matters throughout this list. Many ingredients survived even when the old menu names, combinations, and presentations did not. And perhaps that is why a 1950s diner menu can feel both completely familiar and strangely distant at the same time. What disappeared from the diner was not only food, but a whole vocabulary of phosphates, malts, diet plates, croquettes, and hot sandwiches. Some orders vanished almost completely, while others survived only after changing shape, moving to another region, or becoming a specialty instead of a standard. The chrome counters and glass dessert cases mattered because they turned ordinary meals into routines people repeated with friends, co-workers, and family. That is why one spoonful of tapioca or one plate of gravy-soaked bread can reopen a memory more quickly than a photograph. If one of these old orders brought back your diner, your counter stool, or your favorite booth, then part of that menu is still here.